I think I can make sense of the enduring mystery of Littlefinger and Varys's intrigue with Cat and the catspaw's dagger in A Game of Thrones. It's one of the central locuses of confusion in the first book. What are Littlefinger and Varys up to? What are they doing in their meeting with Cat in Cat 4? Are they working together, etc.? I think a lot of thought has been put into that over the years. I'd like to present something to you that makes sense to me. But first, I'm Greg, aka Moonman, and I'm sorry. Sorry I haven't put out part 3 of Stannis, That Peach, and the Battle of Wind. It's coming. I really am working diligently, but there are snags. Among them is funding. While being laid off most of the last year has given me time to embark on this rather ambitious project, it takes more than time. So in addition to needing to pay for things like rent, or mortgage in my case, the next video really needs an AGoT and an Aegon the Conqueror and, anyway, money. So that's why I'm doing this. I have a lot to talk about. I have endless thoughts about A Song of Ice and Fire, innumerable theories, large and small, which are driving me nuts, just rattling around in my head. So I figured that by podcasting some of them, let's say weekly, I can get them out of my head and maybe start some conversations and bring in some much needed support. This will be unscripted, easy to produce, and therefore won't take away from my work on the videos, nor will it be about the topics of the current series, at least mostly. A way for me to, reach out to anyone interested in hearing what's going on in my mind as I, mutter to myself around the grocery store about, in this case, Varys and Littlefinger. So if you want to follow that more regularly, head over to Patreon. The new $5 tier will get you access to this going forward, as well as the other higher tiers will as well. Because, what can I say? I need the cash, and I really want to talk about all this stuff. I have, a lot going through my head, even if part 3 of the series is coming actually quite soon, I think, assuming I can, get over the last few hurdles here. And that's going to be a long series, and there's a lot to talk about there. And if I don't start getting some of these other thoughts out of my head that maybe could still be a more involved video in the future, or maybe never would be because they're too small to really put that much effort into, well, it would still be a long time before that's going to happen. So I'd like to start talking about this now because, recently, what's on my mind is, as I say, this enduring mystery of what the hell is up with Littlefinger and Varys and whatever they are doing with Cat in Cat 4 of A Game of Thrones. What is their plan? Are they working together? Are they working separately? Are they just getting really lucky? Okay, so a first major question is how and why are the two sneaks here working together? To answer that first, I would say, though they may be, on the largest long-term scale rivals, they are necessarily rivals in secret. So they sit on a small council together, and so they would be practiced at pretending to work together as part of their duties and doing many things, genuinely working together on many things that do not conflict or that serve their own purposes, even if, obviously Varys is plotting the downfall of the dynasty, and Littlefinger probably even now has his own very lofty ambitions. Again, that I'll get to in part 4 of the Battle of Wind series. So even if he's an ambitious maniac, they have roles to play day to day that are how they maintain their current power. Just to show how they work together. The one thing that's interesting is the repartee about Robert being so loved. Littlefinger says something like, Robert is the most beloved of all kings, at least in Lord Varys' hearing. And obviously, this goes to what I'm saying in Battle of Wind, that there is an understanding by many people in the realm that the Baratheon dynasty is weak, that there is going to be lots of whispering, that this is, a further highlighting of that by the author here, I think. But there's this perfect other way to take it, which is establishing them as archetypal, flattering courtiers, right? And as Robert as a weak king. So just like when Ned talks to Robert, and Robert does seem, as I talk about in, in one of the first 2 episodes of the series, that, he's worried. He seems to be worried about like Targaryen restoration, about Viserys, about wars to come. And Ned brushes him off. You can take that as like, well, he's genuinely concerned about something. Or you can take it as bluster and exaggeration. And you can take Ned's response as, well, that must be the common wisdom in the realm. Well, you can take this seriously, or you can say, well, it must just be Littlefinger making a revealing dig about the nature of being a flattering courtier in the court of an ineffective king who doesn't want to hear bad news and wants to be told that everybody loves him. And so you're left like not, and that's probably how you read that on the first read. Like, well, yeah, of course Robert has enemies. I'm not learning anything new here. Of course he does. Of course people whisper. That's the nature of rule, right? And so when Littlefinger says, at least in Lord Varys' hearing, Robert's very popular. He's really just, saying, he's really just indicating that maybe they flatter the king a bit and don't always like, tell him about every last one of the whispers they hear about people grumbling about Robert, when actually it's more serious. But on a first read, that's probably what we get, and it gives us this flavor of what Robert's court is like. That is partly true, but again, I would say is actually much more. Then there's the questions of like, well, how do they find out about the dagger? When do they know it? Is it from listening to Erin Santagar? Is it from Maury, the ship captain? Let's just forget about all that. Let's just imagine that Varys knows what he needs to know about the dagger. There's plenty of vectors of information. He is the spy master. That's the whole point. That's what we're introducing here. He knows. How he knows, there's multiple vectors of how he can know. He knows. Does he already know what dagger was used to try to kill Bran before it leaves Winterfell? Yeah, maybe. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that the truth of this is very, very dangerous information. And this, here, we get to one of the cruxes of my theory. If Varys is trying to hold the fragile Baratheon-Lannister alliance together, this is very dangerous information. Why? Well, first of all, it's Robert's damn dagger. Robert's dagger was used to try to kill Bran Stark. Now, it's easy to imagine that, well, Ned wouldn't believe that Robert would do anything to harm him, and this could all be figured out, and they could all have all these conversations, and that's all true. But that does not change the fact that, from the point of view of courtiers like Varys and Littlefinger, this is dangerous information. Recall that even Cersei considers for a moment that Robert might actually be responsible. There is this concept. Even the catspaw says, we know from Cat's point of view that the catspaw says like it's a mercy, right? Possibly indicating someone's intention, someone's motivation for taking Bran's life, giving the gift of mercy. And, even Cersei at some point considers like Robert drunken, feeling like, this kid needs the gift of mercy, maybe could have done this, right? But okay, setting that aside, maybe Ned would never believe that, even drunk. Robert would never do that. Multiple characters consider that it may very well, and I actually become convinced that it's Joffrey. Jaime and Tyrion more or less become convinced. Now, that's a whole other story. This gets into my prejudices as well, I think, as well as Preston's. I mean, he has a pretty good analysis of the attempted murder of Bran Stark, who hired the catspaw. He posits several possibilities, but I think his analysis that it's not Joffrey is pretty good. We're first presented with this in this passage on with Tyrion in the litter on the way to must be Joffrey's wedding, I think. Thinking about it, and he's shit-faced drunk and he's making like poor logical leaps to get to it being Joffrey. It doesn't actually make sense. Again, my prejudice, I like Preston's idea that it's Mance. That's a whole other story. But again, just to put my prejudices on the table here, the point is, like, people do come to the conclusion that it's Joffrey. And that is believable. Like, it is like, there is absolutely a logic to that. But whatever Varys thinks really happened, let's say when he hears about Roderick's conversation with Erin Santagar, whether he's ready to even make a guess about who actually hired the catspaw, who actually provided the dagger. And even knowing that it would be very silly for someone to give a recognizable dagger that belongs to them to murder someone with, it's still very dangerous information for the Baratheon-Stark relationship. It's very convincingly dangerous information. So Varys, as a courtier in service of King Robert, in service of him by, finding this information and acting on it to prevent threats to his rule, it's now part of his prerogative, both in terms of his duties and his ultimate plot to do Targaryen restoration, because even in that case, he's trying to hold this together. He needs to quash this. So knowing what he knows, however he knows it, let's say he knows that the dagger was Littlefinger's at one time, but was now Robert's. One possible way is he just went and asked Erin Santagar after Roderick left and talked to him, like, what's the deal with this fucking dagger? The dagger that Santagar may have refused to identify himself because it's such politically dangerous information. He may have gone to Varys without Varys having to come to him because this is such a dangerous matter. That's simple enough right there. The point is, like, it doesn't matter how he knows these things. It's reasonable that he knows everything he needs to know. So he knows it's Robert's dagger, which is dangerous because it implicates Baratheons and Lannisters, or it could be used to. And he knows it was previously Littlefinger's, which means he knows Littlefinger can identify the blade, which gives him an opportunity to set up Baelish in the commission of a crime. Not the crime of the attempted murder of Bran Stark, the crime of implicating Tyrion Lannister in that crime. He can go to Littlefinger and easily make the case that Robert's knife being used in the attempted murder of Bran Stark is very dangerous. And as Robert's courtiers, like, this is something they should deal with. And then, maybe more importantly, even if you say, well, Ned would never believe this, blah, 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 he can make the case, the convincing case that this kind of, the possibilities don't matter in this case. They're like, well, this will probably happen. This is dangerous, so you have to quash it so it never gets out. Okay, so he can earnestly make that case. This is just too politically toxic. It needs to be quashed. And then he might also say to Littlefinger, that being the case, the fact that this is so dangerous and it needed to not get out so that no one can even speculate about it, one way that someone could decide to quash that fact is by pinning the dagger on Littlefinger. By going around and making sure that anyone who knew that the dagger was ever briefly Robert's forgets that. And some people are able to come forward and say, well, that's Littlefinger's dagger. And that this would be a smart thing. I think he can convince Littlefinger that this might be a smart thing some people might want to do to quash this issue in its connection to Robert. And so this is a dangerous position for Littlefinger to find himself in. He's an easy scapegoat for something that's, damaging to the most powerful man in Westeros. Like, who's going to jump up and accuse the king when Littlefinger goes down, right? Is it going to help Littlefinger? If Littlefinger gets accused of like, hey, this is your dagger. Did you have something to do with the murder of Bran Stark? Who's going to jump up and say, no, hey, well, wait a minute. Was it Roberts? Is Littlefinger even going to say that? Is that going to help him when you're accused by like clearly being set up by the agents of the king to as a scapegoat? Does it help you to go, well, no, it was actually the king's? No, I mean, you're dead. You're going to be dead. So thus, Varys would say to serve the king and his family, and incidentally to take the heat off Baelish, they must frame someone else. And there are several reasons why Peter might buy that Varys would involve him in this plot rather than letting him take the fall. So first of all, Littlefinger is in King's Landing and would just be arrested and questioned by the Starks if Varys and or Robert tried to pin the dagger on him, and he would relay the true story of the wager to the Starks. Even if, like, eventually they're not going to be able to stop Ned from questioning Littlefinger, even if he ultimately goes down for it. It's also, then that becomes damaging. There's also his ego. Like, he may imagine that Varys doesn't suspect that he's so dangerous. He may think that he's like cleverer than he is, and that, Varys doesn't think of him as an enemy, at least in a big enough way to do this. But, if he hints of any skepticism, Varys can explain his other motive. He can explain, are you not teased? Yeah, that's right. There's a lot more at patreon.com/moonmantheories. So if it sounded like some of that was out of order, like I was referencing things I had already talked about that you hadn't heard, that's why I had done that. The entire first episode of this fledgling Moonman podcast has yet to be named. Over there at the new $5 tier that, as of this recording, I haven't also named or even made. But that is where you will find the rest. I'd like to keep doing this. I'd like for it to fund the finishing of part 3 this month if possible. Hey, that'd be nice. But either way, I want to get some of this off my mind. So have a conversation with me. Tell me what you think down in the comments. Even if you listen to the whole thing, you can comment here or on Patreon. Here's probably best, I guess. Yeah, let me know if this is of any interest to you. Thanks, everybody.